Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ricky Carmichael, and I am the head of air operations for Network Rail. We're here today, to talk to you about drones. But first of all, I'd like to give you a little bit of a history of the air operations in Network Rail. We have been going for a bit over 10 years, and we currently have a fleet of 2 helicopters that you potentially have seen over in the field. And we then have our drone section that works together as a team between the helicopter and the drones to offer the business surveys and data capture that can help us monitor and maintain all of our infrastructure. We started using drones about 4 years ago, and obviously, as everything, it started out small, but the demand for data and the demand for information are increasing, and therefore, so are the department and the needs and the requirements that we are trying to satisfy. And that is kind of how everything has grown from there. So, just to introduce who's with me on the stage today, we've got Paul Lindup, who is the National Drone Manager for Network Rail. We have Stephen Brooks, who is
a senior engineer in geotech.
Sorry. And Jan?
CEO of DroneCloud.
So, if you want to tell us a little bit more, Paul, about what we're doing with the drones.
Yeah, certainly. So I know it might come more apparent why Stephen sat on the end as an engineer, but a lot of people might think, why do we use drones in Network Rail? Because we're a rail company. But as Ricky said, we've been using them internally now for about 4 years. But previous to that, we've got a framework set up. So we've got internal, and then we've got a framework as well that is professional companies that are flying drones for us to capture data. And that's been going for about 6 years now. So we're on the second phase of that framework. But with drones ourselves, as Ricky said, there's probably 3 areas that we use them for, and Ricky's mentioned one of them, so data capture for visual inspections. The second area, which we've sort of trialled a bit more internally about, is the thermal inspections, which is currently done primarily by the helicopters that are in the field. And then the third one really is incident response. So responding to some kind of incident which would normally be a mobile operations manager that attends the scene and actually goes out onto the track. And so what we're trying to do is remove that need to go out on the track. So by using a drone to be able to look at the incident and actually assess the incident, to be able to then bring resources to that. So those are the 3 use cases of generally what we use drones internally, and that's growing pretty much weekly or monthly at the moment. And then as I've mentioned, we've also got the framework up and running. And we've got 4 companies that are actually 4 professional companies that provide aerial services for us, and 2 of which are here. So Bridgeway in the audience, and also Remote Aerial Surveys, and 2 other companies, Plowman Craven and UKDN. So these 4 companies that are currently on our framework and run various projects through our team to capture the data. So that's the drone side of things. I don't know if you wanted to sort of explain, Stephen, how you see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the reason that I'm here is because I'm an internal drone pilot. So I'm not part of air operations. I have a geospatial background. I generally tend to look at GIS systems and look at the data in the earthworks team within technical authority. We saw the huge value that the National Aerial Survey Programme gave us back in 2014. We fully utilised and exploited the data that was available to us then. In 2018, the opportunity came to become a drone pilot internally, went on the course. Then we started, which was a week's course, intense training, both theory and practical. I'd never flown a drone before. I was there with a group of people who were very experienced drone pilots. I looked at it purely from a data capture perspective. We knew what we wanted to get out of that. We have to go out on track. We have to go and look at our earthworks. Some of our earthworks are inaccessible. some of our earthworks or some of the issues we have are on earthworks that don't belong to us, so we can't actually physically get onto the ground. So the ability to integrate drone use within our particular part of the organisation is fantastic, because we can get a nice holistic view of not just the earthwork itself, but the surrounding area. We can look wider afield at some of the, in Scotland particularly, some of the outside party slopes that pose an issue to us. So the use of drones has been incredibly useful to our particular department. Previously, when we first started, all of the drone legislation was completely new to me. Flying a drone was completely new. Working alongside air operations, they helped guide myself personally through all of that knowledge, learning, and how to get the most out of the particular aircraft that we have. There's an intense amount of work that goes into preparing a drone. We can't just go out on site. We can't just take off where we want. We have to do risk assessments of each of our sites. We have to go and research lots of information about our particular locations, make sure we're not flying in a restricted zone, we're not flying over property we shouldn't be flying over, such as schools, prisons, things like that. And leading nicely on to Jan at the end here, his system that they've brought in has made that part of the job very, very simplistic. We're able to see who else is flying in the area. We can have conflict detection, and it pulls together lots of systems from outside, so things like Altitude Angel, bringing all of that information into one nice system, which Jan will hopefully talk about now, and how we plan all our flights in the flight management system.
Yeah, thank you guys. Okay, yeah, so nice kind of leader in. So I guess that, I mean, we've been hearing about some really good examples of, I guess, the complexity of the different use cases of drones within the context of network rail air operations, and I guess where the guys got to was the point where they'd reached critical mass, effectively, where they needed to scale or let the operations still scale. And then so we, as DroneCloud, we had there's a tender process that you guys put out. We bid for that, and we were successful, and it's been quite game-changing for us commercially. But more important than that, I guess the part from us was really what was important for us was to have this as almost a pivotal moment for the industry as well, to show that we can start to support the scale of operations and the complexity involved, and actually continue to do that and move away from what the industry has been up until now, which is individual small operations, but not being able to kind of deliver that level of scale. So DroneCloud was commissioned to provide a platform for the air operations team for the next 5 years. And I guess one of the things that, as I said, that was really important for us was to demonstrate, I guess, the viability of our platform to the industry, but also to help the industry itself demonstrate its own viability, and that we're here to stay. And I think, collectively we've done that. We've seen the process of working with the AirOps team to onboard them onto DroneCloud as more of a partnership than a kind of customer kind of supplier relationship, which has been really, really good for us. And leading on from that, let's say, demonstrating the ability for us to collectively scale up our operation. To give you some kind of ideas around the stats on that, when I think, Paul, you guys were running around, was it 1,000 flights a year when we moved you guys onto the flight management system?
Yeah, so last year we were, 2019 when the lockdown sort of started, flights grew probably by ×4. We were managing about 250 flights 2 years ago, 1,000 flights last year. This year, what we set to achieve?
So we're set to, if we carry on the current kind of trend, about 5,000 flights. So yeah, it's a huge increase,
growth.
which is and that's what we as DroneCloud wanted to come in and help support. Just a quick kind of recap in terms of what kind of an overview of what a flight management system is, because we're using the terminology FMS. But so for everyone's benefit, a flight management system like DroneCloud, we're a cloud-based platform, which I think was another potential, was it a first for Network Rail? I think.
Yep.
So there were kind of number of challenges to overcome in terms of onboarding the guys. But a flight management system is really a platform that manages the entire operation of running your drone fleet, right from planning to the fleet management. And then the maintenance, even through to incident management, etc., flight logging, all that kind of business. So yeah, we've kind of helped deliver that for you guys, and for us, it's been a pleasure, but also kind of a learning process that we're all going on. It's a journey, and we want to support you guys in the future.
And it has been, because when we started looking at this, it was very much to get a system that could not just help us with flight management, as in ensuring safety of flights over our infrastructure, but it is really that whole end-to-end solution where you get that part as the main focus, but you have the audit trail. You know, from a business perspective, we can pull out all the stats of how many flights have we got, what kind of faults are we finding, how many times have Stephen flown in the last month, that kind of thing. So we can keep much better track, as we are required to do, about currency, about battery health. Whether we're doing all the things that we should. So it's not Excel spreadsheets anymore. It is one great system that can help us grow. Because if we didn't have that, Paul would be swamped. I mean, Paul spent an awful lot of time in the past going through and approving flights. Today, it's better.
Massively.
The end goal is to have something that is as automated as we possibly can get it. So it will only be really advanced flights that we would have to kind of sit and evaluate. But what I call vanilla flights, the usual ones will simply just go through the system. And be approved that way.
Yeah. Automatic.
And again, future vision for this is that we can develop this into what is called a UTM, or a system that mirrors what manned aviation have with ATC, so that system speaks with systems and can help with conflicting flights. So again, that you are increasing safety. But again, as Jan says, this is a journey. We're taking small steps. One of the bigger steps we're going to take, hopefully by the end of the summer, is to integrate our helicopter flights with our drone flights. So that means that we're going to incorporate manned and unmanned aviation into one flight management system. And we're very excited about that. We think we're going to be the first. I don't know. We'll see. But that's the plan anyway. So it's small steps along the way. But the end goal for this is to show that we can manage a large fleet of drones and helicopters together in one system in a safe way, and that we can manage the interaction of both our own flights and third-party flights around our infrastructure in a safe way as possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably worth mentioning that we're not up here to sort of sell an automated system, but without automating what we did do, I don't think we'd be able to grow to the level that we are at the moment. So originally, it was all manually processed via an email and a form, which you can't do when you've now got thousands of flights per year. So it was the system that we definitely needed instead of that manual process, because we used to have a 10-day process, a 10-day period, as Rupert raises his eyebrow, and it was a nightmare for the framework companies to be able to actually go out and do drone flights for us with a 10-day notification process. But it was the only way we could physically manage it. But now with an automated process or an electronic system, we can now do it in less than 24 hours. So that sort of shrinking of time means that we can do so many more flights, not just internally, but with external flights and line-side flights. So that automation was the key thing to be able to grow what we do. We've now got a current fleet internally of pilots or drone operators of 39. So we've got 39 Network Rail employees. Some are in the audience, Stephen here as well. They're part-time drone operators. So they've got a day job. They've got a trade within Network Rail, and then they fly the drone as a tool to assist them, whether it be through safety or to be able to just do more, more efficiencies with their jobs. So that's helped us massively within the company. But then that's why we've got the framework companies, who are professional companies to carry out the projects for us. So that's why we've got the difference between the two.
Yeah, actually, just to pick up on that, what Paul and Ricky were saying, and so specifically around the Ricky's mentioning of the UTM, or unmanned traffic management, the equivalent, drone equivalent of air traffic control or air traffic management. That for us as an industry is quite a complex beast to grapple with. It's a journey we're going on. But that being said, there's a lot of concrete steps that we can and should be taking, and we are together to try and kind of, let's say, move us along that journey. So we know, for example, like some of the longer-term objectives, like unifying manned and unmanned airspace. That might be a way off. But what we have seen together, and that's genuinely amazed us on the DroneCloud side, is the uptake of people, third-party companies, so not Network Rail employees or not the framework companies, but just external companies. And I don't know whether I should be saying it in this way, but I'm going to say it anyway. We never realized or didn't appreciate how many of those external third-party companies would engage with a system that allows them to notify Network Rail that they intend to carry out an operation over or around the Network Rail line network. And it's been, the numbers speak for themselves. I mean, it's since we opened up that free open system, it was in January, wasn't it? I think, so since then, there's almost 800 individual companies have put in around 1,500 individual flights, and so those are all companies who want to do the right thing. So we might not have the regulation in place, we might not have all of the systems talking to the other systems. In the drone world, we sometimes call the system of systems. That's a bit, it's a long way off, but it doesn't mean that there isn't a demand by people who want to do the right thing and try and engage in the right way. So there's a lot of goodwill out there, and I think together, if we can kind of keep at least some of that on side and kind of move on that journey, we will get there. Maybe baby steps, but we'll get there in the end.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important for us to know that richer picture around our environment, what's actually going on. As Ricky said, we've got the two helicopters, one generally in the south of the border of Scotland and one in Scotland that's constantly flying. We've then got our own internal drone operators that are flying constantly. We've then got the framework companies constantly flying around the country. So we then need to know who else is operating in that environment. So the system allows us to actually see not only flights that have integrated with our system, but even people that have actually entered details onto the Guardian app, the Drone Assist app. So something that communicates with the FMS. So again, we're building up this bigger picture, and not because we want the data. We don't need the data. We just need to know who's flying what, where, and why. Probably don't need the why, but at least can we avoid that drone, and vice versa. So for safety of deconfliction. That's what we've got in the ATM world, so that's what we need to try and build into the UTM world, just for a safer operation, really. And that's why we're hopefully figure-leading or figureheading by doing this, really, to try and help. As Jan said, it's a free system. We're not charging anyone to use it. So for us, it's all about safety.
I don't know if either Paul or Stephen wants to tell us a little bit about some use cases for drones. So how do we get benefits from using drones?
So, from our perspective, we were one of the early adopters for drones being trained in 2018. I think they'd only been used in internal pilots from 2017. It's been a really powerful journey to go on with the air operations team, because we've come across scenarios with our drone flights which have meant that we've had to work with air operations to look at new ways of working with the standard and the air operations manual. So being in the earthworks team, we often go walking up and down slopes. Very rarely do we get nice flat level ground to take off from. So working with air operations, we set up a process where we could do hand launching of the drones. So we could go to pretty unfriendly sites where you've got a nice flat area to take off from, stand on the side of one of our earthworks, take off and go and scan the side of the hillside, which has been really powerful. We have been looking at LiDAR from drones. So we worked with Bridgeway back in 2017, doing some innovation and R&D, looking at how can we actually fly LiDAR on a drone. I think it was one of the early cases of actually having LiDAR on a drone back in 2017. Captured some really compelling data from that. We had the aerial survey helicopter data. We could link it in with drone data. Earthworks could see the power of this kind of information. We were one of the main protagonists behind the refly in the winter. There is a place for drones, there is a place for helicopters, and we're also looking at satellites as well at the moment. So from our perspective, we're looking at multiple different types of remote sensing, lots of different sensors, and drones have a particular task at hand for quick response, easily deployed, in a relatively small area.
I suppose just to add to the sort of the use cases is that we keep growing our use cases. So we've got 40,000 employees in Network Corral, and quite regularly I'll get an email, or Ricky will get an email, or someone else in the team will, to say, can you do this with a drone? If we haven't, we try it. And so as long as it's safe, it's legal, then we trial it and carry out a proof of concept to just see if we can actually use the drone in that respect. But a lot of people do come to us, and I don't just mean our employees, and say, I want to use a drone. But we actually have to explain to them, what do you actually want? What's the data that you need, as opposed to, I need a drone? And that's been probably one of the biggest challenges within a large company, to explain it's not just about the drone, it's about the sensor. It's about what it's capturing, and that's the biggest thing that we've tried to explain to people. I suppose the other biggest use case that we've sort of carried out more recently is we had a sad loss of an employee at the beginning of this year, I think it was, inspecting the track. And so what we needed to do is look at how could we use a drone to actually still carry out the inspection itself, but from a place of safety. And so the easiest way to do that is, I'm not a track engineer, so I flew the drone, and the track engineer carried out the second control of the aircraft to actually maneuver the camera, zoom in, zoom out, pan left and right, and they inspected the track. And so it's a successful use case at the moment that hopefully will roll out quite soon. But if you imagine how many pieces of track, around 20,000 miles we've got, that need to be inspected. So we've got to look at scalability and how it can actually be carried out. But again, it's a place of safety away from that track. You're still able to physically see what is in that environment, and it's a horrible environment, very hazardous environment. And I suppose the other biggest use case really is our next steps. Is it worth mentioning the Beyond Visual Line of Sight project that we're working on?
I think that would be a good idea to do, yes.
So BVLOS, Beyond Visual Line of Sight. So generally all of our operations up till now have been visual line of sight, within 500 meters of that drone operator. And so as a company that owns 20,000 miles of track, and the land itself is probably only a meter or 10 meters either side of that track, there's limited access to take off and land from. We can't always rely on contacting line-side neighbours to be able to take off from their land. And so the capability that we need is beyond visual line of sight with drones. So we've applied to the CAA, created a safety case. Safety case is back with us, successful. And so later on this year, we'll be flying a long-distance flight, hopefully about 20 kilometres, with one flight, with one drone, capturing data along our infrastructure. And the main reason for that is because we don't have track access panels or access points every kilometre. So we need the ability to still inspect that track, but from a set location, a safe, dedicated location. And for us, we're using a big airfield. Perfect place to take a large drone off. And so that will hopefully probably govern what, well, not govern, but give us direction of which way we will go within the company with drones. Will we carry on VLOS, or will we actually start to consider the BVLOS perspective? So that's the next step for us, really. Big project, which we'll be really keen to sort of conclude and then have the findings from in a report to be able to share with people. But the key thing for us is we want to let everyone else know how we did it. So we're creating a video as well at the same time. There's a story piece from beginning to end, so then anyone else can learn from our, not mistakes, but our journey along the way, really. Because we're a public sector company, so why would we keep it to ourselves? So that's why we want to try and get that story put together and then share it with everyone.
And to just add to that as well, there are great expectations to this beyond visual line of sight flying. And obviously there are quite a lot of opportunities that potentially can be unlocked with this technology. But what we've found is that there is a challenge in managing people's expectations because drone technology is great, and we're using it to so many different things, and we're gaining really great benefits. But they're not the right tool for everything. So it is about finding the right balance. And when it comes to BB loss, it is to make sure that it actually makes sense where we do it. And we're not going to do BB loss everywhere, because again, that will not make sense. So we are definitely going to have to work with industry. Again, we're not a drone company, and that's not why we're doing this. We're doing this to prove a point, basically, and because we thought it would be a good thing to do. But we don't manufacture drones, and we are not in any way, shape or form going to do that. So once we have proved our flight, proved that we can do what we would like to do, well then we will engage with industry, because as Paul says, this is about scalability. And if we come to the decision that this is what we want to do, well, we're not going to use 2 or 3 drones. We're going to need 200 or 300 or 400 drones. And right now, industry can actually not respond to that. If I made a phone call tomorrow and said, I'd like 500 drones, I think the only place I could get that would be in China. And that might not necessarily be where we'd like to go in the future. So we know that we are going to have to engage with industry on this when we finish our little project, and say how are we going to take this forward? Who wants to join us on the journey? And how can we develop this into something that will be really exciting for Network Rail, and something that is sustainable, it's safe, and it's something that can help us go further into the future. It is about growing the technology and shaping it into what we need as a company, not necessarily what is available in the marketplace as well. I say this a lot, and I'll say it again. I wish that there would be manufacturers that would actually come and ask us what it is that we need. Instead, we get bombarded with things that they have come up with, they have innovated, and that's great. Innovation is obviously, what we all want. But I would really welcome more collaboration, because again, we work in a very unique environment, and it comes with unique challenges. So if we can find companies that we can work with that understand that environment, and that can help us with the issues we have, well then we can go far together, and we would like to start doing that when we're done with our BB loss project, and the follow-on project to that is going to be our impact testing. Because that is one of again, we're looking at all of this from a safety perspective, and one of the big things that I'm concerned about is a drone falling out the sky and hitting a moving train. We don't actually know what's going to happen if that happens one day. The tests and the data that we are basing our safety and our risk assessment on today are about 30 years old. And it was done with frozen turkeys, I believe. We are going to do it slightly more scientifically this time around. So we are engaging probably at the end of the summer, early autumn. We'll start a project where we will actually, literally throw drones at windscreens at speed and see what happens. Because again, to me, it's extremely important that we understand that the equipment that we use above our railway is actually safe. We have a weight limit today of 7 kilos. We believe that that's safe based on historic information. But before we go on a bigger journey where we incorporate equipment that's going to fly potentially for hundreds of miles, I believe that it's important that we have the correct information about safety and we understand what the risks are and that we can approach that in a sensible way. So that's kind of what we're looking at least a close-up future. So
I think the important bit about that is that it's not just the drone itself, but we want to look at holistically as a drone, a battery, a sensor, the motor arm that's sticking out that could penetrate the windscreen. So that's why, as Ricky said, we want real drones hitting real windscreens, not computer-generated data or, like you say, frozen turkeys. So that's why we need to know what would a carbon fibre aircraft do, what would a plastic aircraft do, or an aircraft-grade aluminium aircraft do. So that's why we want to do real tests with an independent body that will do a report that we know is independent, not backed by DJI or any other manufacturer. So that's why we want it to be true testing, really. And it'll give us some really good data as well.
Yeah. So that was kind of what we had lined up for you guys. And now, if there are any questions.
We've got a person with a microphone, apparently. Thank you. Be gentle on us, Rupert.
No, you're doing the holding. Okay. So a couple of things. Rupert Dent is my name, from Bridgeway, and thank you first of all, because you shared some really interesting information and information I haven't heard before, and I think that's tremendous. And you know the willingness to share and work together. The point that you were making, Ricky, is superb, and I think that's exactly how we should all, as a community, you know, be working. I was just, I suppose, interested in next steps after BVLOS, so trial, and then how do you see the next steps after that in terms of what your engagement as a company will be with BVLOS, and how typically do you sort of see that working?
I think what we need to do is we need to take a pause after we've done the BVLOS, and then we as a company, and with that I mean both AirOps, because we will have our views on this, but we got to remember that we're here for one reason, and that's for our customers. So what we need to do is we need to engage with the rest of our business and say what's your requirements, what is it that you're trying to achieve, and together we'll come up with how we believe the future will look. So again, are we looking at doing beyond visual line of flights for, say, up to 100 miles? Because that's kind of what the business are looking at. Or are we looking at, we'd like to do it from London to Glasgow because that makes sense. And I'm just theorizing here. But it needs to be in collaboration with our customers, because it's not what we want. We're here to service our customers. So we will come up with requirements that are realistic, and that's where the knowledge that we bring to the table comes into play. And so we will basically come up with a requirement document almost, you know, that will say this is what we're trying to achieve. Go out to industry and say who wants to join, and whether that's going to be on a project basis or tender or whatever, you know, that time will tell.
So,
thank you.
From a customer as well as a pilot perspective, from Earthworks, we definitely have a need to go beyond visual line of sight. So we often find we're limited. When we get to that 500-meter buffer, we have to pack away, move up, and take off again. We're not looking necessarily at going from London to Glasgow, but we're maybe looking 5-10 kilometres, looking at a whole earthwork, for example. There are other assets as well. Drainage would want to look at their entire drainage system, for example. So there are many business cases within Network Rail for that sort of beyond visual line of sight case. So I very much hope as a customer that there will be a future beyond this trial, because we definitely have a need for it within our part of the business.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions at all?
Hi guys. Just how it'll work with the BV last one again in DroneCloud. I mean, if it'll be 20k, will it be split up several polygons, or how does deconfliction work over a long area? Is that any thought about that yet? Or
Thanks, Russell. I suppose it's not been thought of yet because we haven't actually. I mean, we've planned the location of where we're going to do the 20-kilometre flight, but we've not planned on whether it's going to be multiple polygon flight or one large polygon flight, really.
Yeah, so I mean, we weren't mentioning polygons here. I guess there's probably a bit of inherent knowledge of the platform. So just a kind of 101 for everyone else. So within the DroneCloud platform and kind of, I guess, most platforms where you're engaging with trying to, which is what we're doing here really is state an intention to fly over a certain route and then potentially book out some, and this is where it gets a bit more kind of technical, interesting, book out airspace. Come to that in a minute. But so the polygons are effectively we're just drawing an area over a map to say, you know, I intend to fly in this within the parameters of this area. So let's say from a technical perspective, it doesn't really matter. You can draw a polygon from here to Paris if you want. That's just and I intend to do that. That's not the complexity. The part that we, I guess, from the DroneCloud side, want to help with, and this is the journey we're going to need to go on together, is how do we, at scale, safely, not just say I intend to work in that area, but work together to start to show the regulators that this is something that can be done safely at scale. So I'm kind of glossing over a lot of the, should we say, the technicalities there, and also the work that needs to be done, and there's a lot of it. But from the DroneCloud side, obviously, we're more than happy, and we are engaged in some Innovate UK funded projects as part of the Future Flight Challenge to address some of these problems and topics. I won't say too much about that now because that's not really what we're here for. But the point is, from the DroneCloud side, and as an industry, so with our partners like Altitude Angel and various others, we'll be working together to try and help make that case that we can, at scale, reliably, safely, do these things that we want to do, which means that in reality, you guys just end up with a nice polygon on the map that says, I want to fly from point A to point B, let me at it. And so it's for us to kind of help unlock that.
Well, I suppose the bit that we've not mentioned, even though we've mentioned that we've got an operational safety case, or what is now an operational authorization for that distance, we've not asked for any additional height or any close to proximity of sort of property outside of our control. So we've just asked for standard permissions, just extra length in the area that we're going to fly. So we're actually going to fly 20 kilometres out, turn around 20 kilometres back. So it's a 40-kilometre flight, but over that 20-kilometre piece of track. The second part, which we've not mentioned, is we've had to engage with the airspace team, the CAA airspace team, and we're going to create a structure in the sky, a temporary danger area. So that will be NOTAM'd anyway. So if the NOTAM's there, it will appear on the Altitude Angel system, which will appear on onto the DroneCloud system. So that airspace will be there as a temporary danger area for us to operate our aircraft in, with an ability for other aircraft to operate in that airspace as well.
Do you mind sharing some do's and don'ts about using drones?
I suppose we've come up with a number of sort of do's and don'ts documents, really, internally, to try and assist Network Rail employees to make sure they don't do the wrong things. The biggest thing for me, as a learning point when I came to the company 3.5 years ago, is I didn't really consider the risk of operating drones around the infrastructure. I'd operated drones for 5 years at that point, but I'd not considered the additional risk of being in the high electrification, the high LTE, the sort of various different structures, systems, electronic systems in that environment, the train vortices, the other drones that are operating in that area. So it's a very busy, hazardous environment. And it's only over the last 3 and a bit years I've actually learnt that. So we have created a couple of internal documents of do's and don'ts, but we've not really done enough for external. Hopefully soon we'll be releasing a little bit of knowledge just to sort of say, please don't do this and you can do that. But the biggest thing for us is we don't own the airspace. We don't. We're a company, just like any other company that's a landowner, but we don't physically own the airspace. But we kind of manage the risk above our infrastructure. And we have done for years. So for argument's sake, if Highways England need to build a bridge over our infrastructure, we actually have to speak to them, and we are tightly controlled over what they can do. Because if they put something on our track, there's obviously a danger to the paying customers and the trains and the freight companies. So we manage that risk. There's no difference to flying a drone over our track. We still need to manage the risk of that drone in our infrastructure. So the only way that we can do that is whenever they use the system, the DroneCloud system, if it comes through and they've not actually mitigated enough risk, I go back to them and say, can you consider this as an additional piece of risk in your risk assessment? If they're not aware of it, most people wouldn't be, because that would be me 3.5 years ago. So I try and educate them to try and bring them up to nowhere near the similar speed to the framework companies or internals, but at least give them a portion of idea of what the risk is so they can mitigate it. But I suppose the biggest don't is, I know we've lost that 50-metre distance from property outside of our control, but don't operate drones within 50 metres of our train track unless you spoke to us. And again, there's no legislation that backs that anymore, but it's doing the right thing, like these 1,700 flights that have done. Yeah. So it's companies that are doing the due diligence and thinking, I want to do the right thing. So that would probably be the biggest don't. And yeah, the biggest do is just talk to us. We're not scary people. We'd rather facilitate that drone flight than say no, because we can't really say no because we don't own the airspace. So it's a bit of a circle, but we'd rather help people to make it safer. And that's probably the biggest key message. And that's why the system is free to use. We don't want people to have a barrier of not being able to use a free system that makes things safer, because we're a safety critical company. Thank you.
Go for it.
Quite conversely to you, Paul, I've got a whole career in the rail industry and kind of drone hobbyist, so I'm kind of looking at it from the other perspective. I can see a lot of benefits, VLOS, really, if it obviously, if it works out that way in terms of certification that can be controlled by Network Rail, that kind of thing, along the lines of Sentinel competence, that kind of thing. Is that something that's been looked at yet?
As in the Sentinel competence?
Well, not so much the Sentinel competence, but more like as in if you are deemed competent to fly a drone, that you might be able to use a smaller drone VLOS rather than it, as in it be planned and approved through some planning and approval process.
So almost like a tiered approach of risk and distance.
Absolutely.
No. It has been considered, but what we want to do is make sure that any Network Rail employee that flies a drone over the infrastructure is the full fat version of it. They have done all of the training, as opposed to if this is a really low risk or low sort of weight or closeness flight, then you still do exactly the same training as everyone else. Is that not what you mean? But
No, sorry. What I meant also was kind of obviously as our safe working zones are tiered. Would there be a tiered approach to being able to use VLOS flights for certain activities, let's say? Something off the top of my head, say, at the end of a possession to check that everyone's clear, that kind of thing.
Oh, that's already in place with Network Rail employees. So we've already got Network Rail trained drone operators that are using it for site walkouts, various inspections of the assets, geotechnical, media team are trained up with drone operations, mobile operations managers, electrification engineers. So there's loads of different employees that are trained up to be able to do exactly what you've just suggested. But what we need to do is make sure that they've literally followed a really tight, stringent process. But it's not a Network Rail process, and that's where it becomes tricky. So I'm the accountable manager to the CAA, to Network Rail. So I'm that middle person that makes sure that we're doing a non-network rail thing in network rail. So I suppose that process has to be really strict for that reason. And we have had, people thinking that they can just deploy a drone because they're a hobbyist, they've got a drone. Why can't I fly the drone? But again, it's because of the safety critical culture that we work in. We've just got to make sure that that the system's telling you that there's another drone flight from our framework companies or Stephen down the road is actually occurring. And the only way we can do that is by that very strict process.
Sorry. It's just important to add that all of our aircraft that we have get serviced every year. And if you you can't bring your own aircraft on there, we've got no trackability or traceability of has that aircraft actually gone through all the necessary servicing? Is its battery okay? Are the blades okay? We have to go through all of these checks pre-takeoff and after takeoff to make sure that those aircraft are responding how we expect them to. And if we have any doubt, the aircraft comes down, box it away, it goes off and gets serviced. It's happened to me. I've had an aircraft that wasn't responding properly. On the phone to Paul straight away, said, this isn't right, it's not getting compass calibration. Ended up getting serviced and back, and it was before it went back up in the air. We can't fly an aircraft over live infrastructure if we've got any questions about its functionality. It's just too dangerous, the risks are too high.
That was kind of where I was getting to. I didn't know that existed currently, that there was, that there was a function, I guess, that were enabled to do that.
Yeah. So any department that gets an employee trained up, they take on the ongoing costs of I have to go on CPD days each year. The aircraft has to get serviced each year, at least once a year, depending on the usability of it. So it's not just a go on the course, get a drone, you can fly. You have to do all of the continual learning afterwards. Since I've been flying in the last 3 years, the legislation's changed. The sorts of aircraft that we can fly have changed. What we can use on the network wasn't possible 3 years ago. And it's just going to keep changing. It's just that a constant evolution of technology, and we just got to keep on top of it.
One other thing maybe to point out is you said just use a little drone. So one thing is to use a little drone, but if we don't know where that little drone can take out a big drone, and then you're in a big mess. So it's size doesn't matter in this instance. It's about knowing where everything is, whether it's a sub 250 gram drone or whether it's 25 kilos. It's again, we need to know where everything is.
So that's another good point about the really small drones. They have GPS in them, send them up, and they're really stable. Anybody can fly them. We get trained to fly in what's called attitude mode, so when you don't have GPS. So if we lose control, we're trained, if the GPS signal goes, we're trained to take over and fly that aircraft. It's very difficult. It's very different from flying in GPS mode. So that's why we do a lot of this training to do that. So that's why Paul and our operations are quite strict on, what aircraft you can fly in and when you can fly it.
Yeah, one of the other things as well, I'll probably add to that as well, is that because I think that's from the internal kind of within Network Rail, but also I think because we're now seeing so many external organisations, third parties, if we want to call them that, engaging with the Air Ops team to notify them of their intent. I think one of the things that we're looking at doing together is to start to help those guys and kind of not through formal training, but through the system. Something that for example, for the Air Ops guys to give advice through the system as to what kind of things the Air Ops team needs to see and what kind of things you as an external operator should be thinking about if you want to fly. Obviously as well as the kind of process you'd have to go through to kind of notify the Air Ops team, but to kind of script that a little bit so that you can say, right, okay, well, you've engaged, you're doing the right thing, you've come to us to say that, I want to do this kind of operation over or around the line network. Have you thought about these types of things? So I think that's something that from us, from the DroneCloud side, we've kind of almost learnt that from the way that these guys, carry out or how kind of rightly obsessional they are about safety, and we're kind of baking that into the platform, you know, for other users, you know, so that we all as an industry can do the right thing. So I think that's a good kind of example of like symbiosis. You know, we as a company, at the end of the day, we're a software company at heart. It's up to the kind of the experts in the field to drive you know, what we're doing for the industry, and that's, I think, it's been a really good example of where we've learned off you guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if there isn't any other questions, we'll say thank you very much for your time this afternoon. We're happy to see so many faces. Just a last point to finish off with. This is all new. This is still a very, very young industry, and we're all learning. A lot of the things that we do are firsts. We don't shout about firsts. But we are very innovative in Network Rail in this area, and we're very proud of that. So bear with us. We will get there. There's going to be some bumps in the roads, because there always is, but that's the challenges, and that's where we grow and where we get better. So thank you for taking an interest, and watch this space. Hopefully we'll have some good and exciting news next year. Thank you very much.